Siliwangi Cimahi. For this video, I want to explain about material is language in society, which is a language, culture, and gender. I hope you will be enjoy to watch the video until the end. Okay, for this video, I will explain about language, culture, and gender, and explain about the content. The first one is cultural transmission, the second is culture, the third is relationship between language and culture, the fourth is linguistic relative, the fifth is language and thought, and the last one is language and gender. For the first one is cultural transmission. We may inherit physical features such as brown eyes and dark hair from our parents, but we don't inherit the language. We acquire a language in a culture with other speakers and not from parental genes. For example, a children born to Korean parents in Korea, but adopted and brought up from birth by English speaker in the United States will have physical characteristics inherited from his or her natural parents, but will inevitably speak English. This is process whereby a language is passed on from one generation to the next is described as cultural transmission. It is from George Yule. It is clear that human for the next material is culture. One of language property is cultural transmission. Then, what is meant by culture? Culture means by word dog is whatever a person must know in order to function in a particular society. This is the same sense as good enough spell definition in word dog. Say that a society culture consists of whatever it is one has to know or believe in order to operate in manner acceptable to its member, and to do so in any rule that they accept for anyone of themselves. The third material is relationship between language and culture. There are three parts to describe the relationship between language and culture. First, one long-standing claim is that the structure of language determines the way in which speakers of that language view the world. Second is a somewhat weaker version is that the structure does not determine the worldview but is still extremely influential in predisposing speakers of language toward adopting a particular worldview. The third is the opposite claim would be that the culture of a people find reflection in the language they employ. Because they follow certain things and do them in a certain way, they come to use their language in a way that reflect what they follow and what they do. In this view, cultural requirements do not determine the structure of a language. The next material is linguistic relativity. The hypothesis of linguistic relativity holds that the structure of a language affects its speaker worldview or cognition, also known as the Saber-Whorf hypothesis or Whorfianism. The principle is often defined to include two versions, the strong hypothesis and the weak hypothesis. The strong version say that language determines thought and that linguistic categories limit and determine cognitive categories. The weak version say that linguistic category and usage only influence thought and decision. The term Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is considered a misnomer by linguistics for several reasons. Edward Sapir and Benjamin Low Whorf never co-authored any works and never stated their. The next is PIP material. It is language and thought. There are two lines of evidence that support a weak version of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. These are the first line of evidence related to linguistic determinism and the idea that language facilitates our conceptualizing capacity. The assumption in cognitive linguistics is that language reflects patterns of thought and can be seen as a means of encoding and externalizing thought. It follows from this view that patterns of meaning in language represent a conventional means of encoding conceptual structure and organization for purposes of communication. This is known as the symbolic function of language. It also follows from this view that different ways of expressing or encoding ideas in language represent different patterns of thought, so that encountering different linguistic options for encoding ideas can influence the way we reason. The last material is language and gender. There are several approaches to language and gender. The first one is deficit approach, dominant approach, the different approach, and the social construction approach. Okay, for the first approach is deficit approach is characteristic of the earliest work which claims to establish something called woman language or WL, which is characteristic by linguistic forms such as hedges and pretty, adjectives like charming, divine, nice, and talking in italic. Well, or WL is described as weak and unassertive, in other words, as deficient. Implicit. The third approach is the different approach, emphasizes the idea that women and men belong to different subcultures. The discovery of distinct male and female subcultures in the 1980 seems to have been a direct result of women's growing resistance to being treated as a subordinate group. Social constructionist approach. Gender identity is seen as a social construct rather than as a given social category. Speakers should be seen as doing gender rather than statically being a particular gender. That's all the material from me. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next book. Bye bye!